in order for for the Western civilization to come back to what it was, we must come back to Jesus Christ again, but we must come back to Christianizing the world again like we did at one time. Welcome to Alliance Against Communism. Stopping anti-Western subversion. Stopping Marxism. Stopping wokeism. Stopping radical gender ideology. Stopping foreign and domestic enemies of the United States of America. Stopping critical race theory. The fight is on. We are not going to stand for this Marxist attack on this country. We are going to resist. We are going to fight back. You are not going to make us bow down. We will not submit. Our rights and responsibilities come from God. We bow down to nothing and to nobody but God himself. All right, in this segment, we're going to talk about not only coming back to Jesus Christ, but coming back to Christianizing the world again. You see, what made Western civilization superior to all civilizations is because we became Christians, and we also went and started Christianizing the world and civilizing the world. And that's what, because we were on the offensive. So we made a great civilization, and then we went to other countries trying to help people make a great civilization there. So we were kind of on the offensive in that one. So, in order for us to bring back the notion of Western superiority again, to bring back the greatness of the West, we must go back to Christianizing the world again, to bringing Western civilization to the barbaric world, if that makes sense, to the third world. That's when we really get, that's what we should be doing. And I'm going to give you an example. So, when Jesus was crucified, he was risen on the third day. He came back for the second time. And during the second coming, this is what he said to us. He says, "Then Jesus came and I'm going to quote to you, and I'll quote to you. I'll let you know the references in the blog post. Then Jesus came to them and said, 'All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all that I've commanded you. And surely I'm with you always, even until the end of age.'" So the command that Jesus gave us was to go and to baptize the world and to make disciples of all nations. That's what he told us to do. And we in the West have failed that. We used to do that, and we've failed that. And look at where we've become. We're becoming more destroyed every single day. So we failed in that. So if we want, in order for the Western civilization to come back to what it was, we must come back to Jesus Christ again, but we must come back to Christianizing the world again like we did at one time. So basically that's it. We've turned our back on Jesus Christ, and we've turned our back on Christianizing the world, and that's what's destroying us. So even if we don't know much about Christ and much about, Christianizing the world, we can always donate to people that are doing that to help in that aspect.
So shouldn't we be focused on Christianizing the Western world before we worry about everybody else in the world?
Well, we are already a Christian nation. The West is already all Christian. Of course, now all these forces of darkness are taking over us. So we must be. What I'm trying to say is we must be on the offensive. Okay. So what made us great is that not only did we Christianize our own selves and our own households, but we went to the third world and started Christianizing them.
I get that. I studied it, but at the same time, I think that we should be focusing on the West doing it to the West before, bringing people back into the fold before we start worrying about other nations.
Of course, I completely agree with that. But see, at one time we already had that at one time in our greatness. That the West itself was very Christian, but we got to a point where we were so great, we were so Christian. We went to start going to other countries and started making disciples. But Jesus' word says, "Go to all nations and make disciples." Right. Whoever's doing that's truly Jesus' disciples of today. So it's of course we should go and help Christianize the Western world again. That's what we should be doing. But once we get that, then we should go to the whole world and we start Christianizing the whole world. That's what we should do as a people.
Okay, so how do you propose that we do that?
So if you don't know, so if you don't have enough knowledge to do that, for example, so first of all, you should establish the family structure. The first thing we should do in the Western world, before we start worrying about anybody else, is to establish our own proper family structure. in our own lives. So basically, we accept the Western world. We make a Christian family, okay, and we accept the family structure that God has implemented for us, and we build a family based on concept. That's the first thing we should do individually, right?
Sure.
So once we get that done, then we should go out there and start spreading the word to other Westerners to make them do the same thing, right? So then we bring the greatness back, and then once we are Christianized, then we go and start Christianizing all the other world, the rest of the world, and that's what we start doing. But once we start getting in that mode of of making ourselves, Christians and establishing our Christian family in our own lives, but once we get in that mode that we start having that charitable spirit of helping the world instead of just ourselves. That's what the Western world is built upon, us basically being selfless in that aspect and civilizing the world. That's what if you look at Western history, we've civilized the world.
That is true.
And if we don't get back in that point again of civilizing the world, then we're never going to bring back the greatness of the West anymore.
Well, I had a professor, I think it was, or maybe it was something that I read many, many years ago, and it was basically the West brought 2/3 of the world out of the dark. Is basically.
So yeah, because like black, like people of color, I'll have to use that's what they like to call themselves. Called that, the white people colonizing other nations is the most racist thing in the world, but it really wasn't racist. It was basically the Western world going and civilizing other nations.
What's really interesting about you saying that is I remember learning about, I forget what country it is, and I can't quote it because I can't remember, but it's one of the sub-Saharan black African countries in Africa that actually is doing quite well. And there was a guy doing studies. I can't remember the guy's name. It's been a while since I read this. And he was talking about, he asked a couple black guys that he worked with, Africans that he worked with, that why this country is doing better than all the surrounding countries. And they said because they still use a form of colonialism in that country.
See when white colonialists took, when they were colonizing nations, they brought all the great ideas of the West into that nation. They brought infrastructure, ideas of government, technology, all these things, advancements, medicine, all these things. They brought that with them. So even though they didn't like foreigners, being in control of their country, they didn't like it, supposedly they say, because they don't want, and nobody wants foreigners controlling their country. But the fact they still benefited from that fact.
Yeah, because they love doing this in school, because you look at the schools and who runs our public schools, which is a disgrace. But they, especially when you and I were in school, we're the same age. They would try and teach us all the horrors that colonization actually brought, and they never ever talked about the benefits.
Yeah, they never talk about the benefits.
And it was just like, well, wait a second. You mean to tell me that you have nations that were thriving because of these benefits, but then it was somehow a negative thing? It's like, well, explain to me how it's a negative thing.
So what I'm trying to say in the essence is that Jesus told us, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them all what I've obeyed you to command. So the bottom line is to obey God. So when we obey God, that's where we get the blessing from God, when we obey God. So just either you choose to obey God or you choose to disobey God. That's your choice. If we choose to obey God, then God will bless us. That's the biggest thing. So the Western world at one time chose to obey God by Christianizing the world and civilizing the world. And that's why the Western world was so blessed for all these years. But now when we've turned our back on Jesus, turned our back on Christianizing the world, look at what the West has become.
Yeah.
It's a dark age is coming, basically.
Well, someone like me, I've talked about this before on the podcast, and looking at it, and I've actually looked at that before, that people like me that were taught to be, kind of leftist and not want to have children, not want to get married. I think that I made a huge mistake with that. And
me too. Because I'm with you. Because I got married, but I never had children.
Well, I never got married. I mean, I've never even settled down. I mean, I'm in my 40s and I've never settled down. This is something that they rammed into my head as a kid, is to not get married, not have children, which is a...
Why? Because they're trying to destroy us. Because Marxists are trying to destroy us by our birth rates. Because they can't do it by guns and bombs. I told you that. I said this before. How do you destroy white people? What you do is you make them hate themselves, and you make them hate patriarchal religion. If you make them hate themselves and hate patriarchal religion, they most likely will not have a child.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what happened to me. It happened to you.
It happened to a lot of us.
Because the reason why they talk about, all white people are racist. Look what they did to, okay. For example, what do leftists say? They say that all white people are racist and all white people are white supremacists. Okay, number one, America is a white supremacist, evil nation. Okay, so if you believe that, and Christianity is white supremacy and it's evil and it's all, if you believe those three things, I want you to play this out. Okay, number one, you believe that America's racist and it's a bad country, so you don't believe in your country anymore. Number two, you believe that white people are white supremacists and they're all evil. Therefore, you don't associate, you hate yourself because you're part of the white race. And if you believe that you're inherently racist and you're evil, then that's a problem. And if you hate Christianity, which is a patriarchal religion, because it is a patriarchal religion because there's God,
the Father,
God,
the Son, the Holy Spirit.
So God, Messiah, man, woman, child. That's the proper form. So if you hate that, then the likelihood of you having children is almost not. You'll probably not have a child because if you're not happy with who you are, you're not happy with your nation. Then why would you want to have a child?
That's what I find interesting about what you're saying is that's what feminism is all about. Women literally looking at it like men should be subservient to them, and what masculine male is going to put up with a feminist woman? So
here's the problem: if I love my country, if I love myself, if I love my family, and I'm connected to all these things, then the likelihood of me having children is very, very high.
Oh yeah.
And then, so what the left is trying to do is they're trying to destroy us, stop us from having children. That's why they keep on repeating this racism and this hatred of America over and over again, because they're trying to stop us from having children, and it's actually working.
Oh, it's worked.
It's actually work. It is literally actually working. Now, these normal people, like useful idiots, don't know what they're doing, but the people on top, the people that are actually, they're propagating they know exactly what they're doing.
Because all the people that follow them are, like you said, I think they're idiots. But then these people on the left, these evil, they know they've done their homework. They know what they're doing.
Now, what I'm trying to tell you is that we want to get in the mind state of Christianizing the world again. So you may not know how to Christianize the world, okay? You may not know how to baptize people or how to make disciples of people. There's people that are doing it already. So the best thing you can do to get in that mind state is to donate to people that are actually doing that work. Yeah. So that you get the blessing from doing that work because you're donating to it. And I want you to get into that mind of that we need to Christianize the world again. If you can't do it yourself, at least donate to somebody that's doing it, and you're going to get yourself in that mind state, which is the mind state that we need to get back into as the Western world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Anything else on this segment?
No, that's good.
Okay.